Hello, welcome back to episode 11 of Guitar Hang with Nick Granville. It's been a bit of a vacation from the podcast, but we are back now that I'm back in the country. I was traveling for a bit. Have you been, Nick? All good? Keeping well?
Yeah. Yeah, and yourself? Tell us about your trip to India.
So basically, my brother-in-law was getting married on the 19th, and as you do, you decide if I'm going there, I might as well do some gigs. So I think the last time we spoke, I had just come back from Delhi, and it hadn't even been 2 weeks, and I had to fly back. So we had two gigs in Mumbai, which went off really well. They were kind of like a very limited audience, all seated. So that was a good gig. So two sets that night. And the next day we played Hyderabad, and that was like the first time we played there in 5 years. So that gig went off really well. Like a whole bunch of people came to see us. And then a few days later, we had a gig in Bangalore just the day before the wedding on the 18th, and that went off really well. They're like pretty unhinged, that audience, because the last time we played there, I think, was August, and that went off like really well. So, it was kind of nice to build on that and, kind of experience the same kind of audience reaction, shall we say. And then I got back and I missed my connecting flight because Qantas took off 4 hours late. But I
Oh,
managed
no.
to make it in on, Sunday, I think around midnight, just about. And took a day to kind of, get over the jet lag and everything. But yeah, looking back, it was a really good trip. We had some good gigs, played some cool stuff, including a couple of songs we hadn't played before, which is always, nice to keep it fresh. Well, yeah, looking to go back, I guess, sometime later this year, do some more gigs. But till then, it's good to be back home.
Man, and the awesome thing is you only have to do one gig and now the whole trip is tax refundable, isn't it?
Pretty much.
Right? Because it's like I was going there for work. I just happened to be at a wedding while I was there.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that sounds great. And you had a bit of a mishap with the airlines with your gear too, I remember you were telling me.
Yeah, actually, the first time I went to Delhi, they dropped the pedal board so hard that they snapped off the HX Stomp power connector. So then I was like, okay, I
Man.
need a right angle connector then. So I sorted that bit out. And then on the next step, they went and they broke the the MIDI in on the
Oh, man.
HX Stomp. And thankfully, I went to JCar and they had the exact replacement part. And it's weird. It's like almost like it was surgically, sheared off the circuit board. Because there was zero damage to the board, but the jack itself was like rattling around inside. So it's almost like,
Oh,
someone took a katana and went,
man, I had that with my laptop one time when I was away. I managed to snap the headphone port off
oh dear.
with a little thing inside it. And of course, because it had the end of the headphone plug in there, it thought it was having headphones, so the speakers wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And of course, it can't plug another pair of headphones in. And someone said, "Oh, just get a toothpick and super glue to stick it on and then pull it out." And it worked. It totally worked.
Amazing.
But yeah, it sucks when that happens and you're away and you're
Yeah.
kind of stuck. That's why you want to have backup if you can.
Pretty
Um,
much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, and is that typical of like how things work in India with the airlines? Is that normal or is that like
Normally,
rare? Is it?
I think, to be honest, like I still got to pad that because I've learned from the experience. I know where the stress points on the whole board are. So I'm gonna like do one more round of trying and minimizing the places of impact because they'll drop it in any case whether you write fragile on it or not. And it's not
Yeah.
necessarily an India specific thing. I mean, I've seen it happen everywhere, and like including the states. Like with flight into Miami, they smashed the guitar case like there were cracks in an SKB. So the airline
Man, I
actually.
found the States to be really good. Everybody talks about the horror stories of the States,
Yep.
but I've always found them really good. And I remember flying Delta one time and they let me take my guitar. I had my Les Paul with me years ago. And they said, "Oh, no, take it on the plane. You can carry it on there." I'm like, "But it's in a hard case." And they're like, "That's fine. Just ask them to put it in the wardrobe." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Wow, okay." But not so great in Australia. And, but the US I've generally found okay. The UK tends to be
I think
hit or
maybe
miss.
we need to make these stickers that says baggage handlers are sexy in different languages and stick them.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe
Or
then.
like, I'll give you an extra $5 if you just leave it alone.
if you don't break it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but the good thing
Oh,
is
dude.
I took the guitar as a carry on Qantas. It seemed to be fine, and like even when I
Oh,
was
good.
boarding, they were like, "Oh, would you like to put that in the the coat closet?" I'm like, "Yes, please," because I don't want people putting their shit on top of it in the overhead.
You
So
said guitars. Did you take more than
no,
one?
one guitar.
Oh, one guitar.
Yeah,
Okay, I was going to say guitars is a bit ambitious.
no, no.
I have seen people do that.
I did
I
that
saw a dude.
once. I
Yeah, I
took a
saw a
double
dude do
case.
that. Man, I saw a dude with two guitars, both in mono gig bags.
Yeah.
One round one shoulder, one round the other, trying to get on the plane. And I'm like,
Wow.
you're pushing your luck, buddy. But yeah.
Yeah. Normally, when I did that, I think a couple of times I had that mono double gig bag, which I still do, and that just about you can cram it into an overhead, but it takes
Man,
up.
those are huge though. They're
Yeah,
like about that deep, with both guitars, and they're actually really heavy.
yeah,
I had one, and I actually sold it because I got sick of the extra weight.
yeah,
I found with two, I could sling one on my back and one under my arm. It was a better way of doing it. So
yeah. Now I think
yeah,
those days are long gone because now I'd rather risk it breaking a string if you have to, and then tell the people some jokes while you put on a new string.
yeah. Or just try and figure out how to play the songs without that string.
No, it doesn't happen because my trem is floating. So the moment one string breaks,
Ah,
the whole
yeah,
thing just detunes completely.
hardtail.
Yeah, well.
So it's like yeah, I've literally had that on gigs where the D string's broken and I've gone, I can't be bothered changing it, so I'll just try and play all the songs without a D string or something.
Well,
And then you start going like, like that's actually what I do when I do the theatre shows too. Usually about halfway through the season, I know the part and I'm really bored of it, and I start trying to play all the same parts, but
yeah.
in different positions with different fingerings, just to amuse myself. It's really bad, but it's
If
what I
you
do.
break a G string, then maybe you can do this. One of those Eric Johnson kind of chords.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's no
And
G
skip
string.
that one
Yeah.
string. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But what do you think would happen if I show up for a Black Star Blues gig with this guitar?
I don't know. I know it's not the same, is it? But
Uh,
but then you don't just play blues either,
no, I don't. Yeah, that's true.
right? And
No,
you've
that's,
often said that people get confused about that because they see the blackstrap blues and they go,
Yeah.
"Is it a blues band?" When really what you're doing is blues influence, but it's broader than that, isn't it?
much broader than that. It's kind of like early Cream. They would run with the blues and then try to take it somewhere different where it hadn't been before. So that was my inspiration actually. Just stem from the blues, but not necessarily play like a 1-4-5 all night. Which I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
I can do it for maybe like 2 songs at the most, and after that, I'm like, no, I don't want to do that anymore.
Well, most music came from the blues anyway.
A lot
I
of
mean,
it
except
did,
maybe
yeah.
classical music, but jazz, rock and roll, all those things all came from the blues anyway. So it's all related.
Yeah.
Some of it's like the ugly cousin, but otherwise,
Yeah, sometimes you almost miss it, and every time you miss it, then someone else comes along who reminds you of it, like even like Stevie Ray Vaughan in the 80s or something like that. You're like, oh, I remember that. That
yeah.
that felt so nice, so yeah, it's almost like they try to make it go away and it keeps coming back.
I think it always will.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that just reaches people in a certain way, and there's always someone new doing something new with it. Do you know what I mean? Although maybe it's not necessarily new; it's just another take on the same thing, and that's like Joe Bonamassa. I mean, doesn't really do anything that original, but it's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
You get to go and see a '59 Les Paul through a Dumble, which nobody else can afford.
Yeah.
And him playing these big things with a killer band, some it's Reese Winans and Anton Fig and those guys he has in the band, and he makes a big spectacular of it, and
Yeah, totally.
and that's fantastic.
I think what happens is like the moment people start, complaining or banging on artists, I'm like, man, listen, anyone who's, I know how tough it is to just go out there and play gigs and keep the whole thing
Yeah.
together. So anyone who's doing that in whatever capacity has my respect. Be it
100%.
Bonamassa or
That's how I
Taylor
look at
Swift
it.
or whoever, as long as they're out there, in front of people are paying money to see them, more power to them. There's always
100%.
people who like to complain. I heard a joke
Well, and they like to think, some people like to think too, that their opinion is the
is
truth.
more important than anyone else's, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, fine. Especially people with a keyboard on the internet. But hey,
I mean, the more you know, sometimes the less it can make you feel. Sometimes
Yeah,
I wish I
I
was
think
like
so.
I could listen with the ears of a 7-year-old again.
Yes, exactly, and be excited by the pentatonic
Yep.
scale or something basic like that. That now it's like we're trying to avoid at all costs, but it's, you know what I mean?
The
Yeah,
first time I played this, I felt like an immense amount of power. I was like, man, this makes me feel good.
well, you can see it straight away. You smiled as soon as you did it,
Yeah,
right?
that still
Because
works, I
it's
guess.
freaking cool. Yeah, totally,
Nice.
absolutely.
I wanted to show you something because I was just doing a lesson with a student, and we were looking at Rosanna by Toto. So I wanted like a zero in on the rhythm guitar parts because I told him we need to like get those right and the rhythm feel right before
Da da
you.
da. All those little.
Exactly. So now here's the interesting thing which I never noticed till I did this. I soloed only the guitar and the drums, so the drum is your timing reference. But listen how late the rhythm guitar part is. Okay, that's your intro. And here comes the guitar. 2, 3, and it's way behind. To the point where I thought the file had slipped, but it's actually in time because the later parts play perfectly in time. But he's so.
It's funny. I don't hear that as being back though. I mean, it is now you
Yeah,
say it, but I've heard that song so many times that
it
it's
feels
just.
correct.
I remember I did a tour without meaning to name drop, but some years ago with I can't really tell the story without mentioning his name, but Dave Weckl, the drummer, and I remember talking to him about it. I was like, and I asked him like, how do you approach playing behind, playing on the beat or ahead or like that kind of stuff? And he said, I don't even look at it like that. He goes, there is no behind, back, or ahead. He goes, there's only where the groove is, and you stay there. So if the groove is back of the beat, that's now where it is. That is now center.
Yep.
It's not center of the beat, but it's center of where the groove is, and that's where you stay. And I thought that was a really interesting way of putting it. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I hadn't really heard anybody kind of say that, and I thought, oh, okay, because really your whole thing is about finding a place and then being consistent, isn't it? Like the way he places that, it's like that the whole way through that particular groove.
Yeah. And there's
It's
another
freaking
thing
awesome.
I noticed like later on when those power chords come in, just listen to.
We'll get a copyright strike now. You
Now we
wait and
won't.
see.
It's all the bits are muted. It just on like this. This is my reaction video.
Yeah, yeah. Guitar teacher reacts.
See, you've got your power chord in here. You've got the power chord here, but not on that. So it's almost like they may have just been muting the distortion track in certain bits, so it's like it's playing on some chords and not on the other.
And
But
not on others.
yeah,
Yeah,
because
quite possibly.
it's definitely not like a consistent thing. It just comes in like almost like stabs. And I always thought that the guitar would double that horn part, that bit, but he just holds the power chord and just does the last bit. It's kind
Yep.
of counter
Which actually
to.
is probably better in some ways. And it's
Yep.
counterintuitive, but it's actually probably better because
It lets the horns do the work.
and it fills out what's happening underneath with the power chord, right?
Yep.
There's a temptation to want to play all of the parts, if you will, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily the right thing to do because that horn line does sound like a guitar part, doesn't it?
It does.
I'm sure he wrote that probably sitting at a guitar going, blah, 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 you know.
And you always associate him playing the Les Paul on this track, but the bulk of the rhythm guitar stuff is on a Strat. You can hear the tremolo bar on the chords just wiggling a little bit and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a half and half on the whole. But yeah, man, what a killer track. There's like so much to teach, from just that one track. Everyone
Oh, yeah.
focuses on that great solo and then that outro bit and stuff like that. But those rhythm guitar parts are what's still like, make me go like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, he's amazing, eh? Like, such a force of nature when it comes to guitar.
Yeah, and I think by that time he must have been in the studio for hours and hours and just logged in all that time. And so like at that point I think your sense of rhythm, plus he must have been playing with Porcaro on I don't know how many ever sessions they did together, and you just form a kind of a lock with the drummer.
I think they were playing together since they were like teenagers or something. You know,
Yeah.
like they had a long relationship, and you can tell it, right? I mean, because they all were studio guys, and then they kind of launched Toto as their own sort of original side project. But yeah, I love that band, man,
Yeah.
and Hold the Line and things like that too. You know,
Did you watch that?
yeah, no, just awesome.
Did you watch that Jamio episode on Porcaro, which just came out?
No,
Oh, it's really
no, I
cool.
haven't.
You should check it out. I mean, even as a guitar player, I'm sure you'd love like a bunch of stuff. I didn't know he played drums on Pink Floyd's Mother.
No, I didn't know that
That
either.
that was him apparently.
Mm.
I think Nick Mason mentions it in his book that he got replaced on some songs on the wall and he wasn't happy about it, but he figured it was for the best of the album. So I think he may have been struggling because that tempo is kind of the one keeps resetting every now and then based on the
Mm.
lyric line. That's what it's following, and so it's not really 4/4. So that's
I love the story of them talking about the Beat It session, you know,
mhm,
and Lucas talks about that, and he says that there was like an R&B version of that song first, but they wanted to keep Michael's vocal and they wanted to keep the guitar solo, I think.
mhm,
So him and Steve and Jeff Porcaro had to go and put their parts on afterwards. So Jeff went in the studio and apparently made his own click track to the vocal and
yeah.
stuff, and then recorded that drum part. And I'm like, wow,
Yeah, and
it's
the,
pretty
the
crazy.
interesting bit is when he figured Eddie's on it, so he went balls to the wall with Marshalls, overdubbed and
Yeah.
stuff. And Quincy came back to him and said, "No, I can't get this on R&B radio if it's that heavy. You got to back off the guitar and just go with the little Fender." So he must have gone
Mm.
with that Rivera modded,
Deluxe.
deluxe or whatever he was using at
Yeah,
the
I think it
time.
was a deluxe. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Jay Graydon was the guy who came up with that circuit because he wanted a variable mid control on the amp, and it developed from there. I don't know if you've checked out much of Jay Graydon's interviews and stuff on YouTube, but that guy
Sure.
is like a serious techie as well, apart from being
Oh
a
yeah.
phenomenal guitar player. So
Yeah, I mean, and one of the studio legends, really. I
yeah.
mean, all that Steely Dan stuff to thousands of other albums, you know. So,
There's
yeah,
this
amazing.
hilarious video of him, I think on the Rivera YouTube channel, where he's trying out the HX, the Helix as a pedal board, strictly as a pedal board in conjunction with his actual amp, and he's gone a bit crazy with the effects, and he's like, he puts on some sound, he's like, oh shit, this is making me want to start smoking weed again.
I love it when stuff like that happens where people just don't know what to do, you know. My friend Ben Fulton, who makes Red Witch pedals, he gave one of his pedals a fuzz pedal to it was Chris Dave's band, but the guitar player, Isaiah Sharkey. And I remember I was at the gig and I was like, man, there was this horrendous feedback in the middle of the gig for like a minute. And apparently he clicked the fuzz pedal on and just left it. And it was just going, like, and he did it, like, it's not like he turned it off, he just left it on for a minute and he
Yeah.
kind of went, oh, and then he clicked it off again. And he said to Ben, I don't really know how to use it. I love that.
Yeah. It's
There was another
unpredictable.
one of Jay Graydon. I think it was Jay Graydon. I saw where he talks about the young musicians and about how he's going to whip their asses. You know, like it's pretty full
Yeah.
on. You know.
Though, like that one on Tim Pierce's channel where he breaks down the peg solo. I never thought I'd be able to play that song ever till I saw that video, and then he shows it so cleanly. I was like, okay, maybe I should try. And then
All those slide things
yeah, there's
that he
all some
does. It's
weird
just like,
bends and stuff. I mean, like I wouldn't be able to play it right now, but like I learned it to a point where I had to spend like maybe 3 hours just practicing those slides. And then I had it for a brief moment in time. I recorded a video. That was like, okay, cool. At least I played it once. But that is probably one of the toughest dance solos to play, I think, just in terms of, executing it cleanly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And crazy to think he just did that. It was just
wait.
like,
Yeah.
because you've no doubt seen the Asia documentary where they play all the alternative solos and stuff, and some of them are like, but they were trying stuff because the Steely Dan guys, Donald and Walter, didn't know what they wanted.
Yeah.
So they kind of said, just try stuff. So there's like maybe Larry Carlton playing with a phaser and something.
Yeah.
And then you hear the Jay Graydon track and it's just perfect. It's like right there. He just did it. It was like amazing.
It's almost got the little bit of that Hawaiian steel guitar kind of thing as well
Yeah.
in it, right? Yeah.
all that sort of
Those
stuff. You know,
dual
I've
bends,
never
yeah.
actually learnt it, but
Yeah.
I've heard it a billion times. So
Interesting. And another one that for me was like a big one was the Bodhisattva solo. That was
oh
just
yeah,
getting my alternate, because that guy doesn't like bend a note, man. It's all like, yeah,
diddle-diddle-diddle-diddle.
everything's like alternate picked and stuff like that. So, I actually ended up learning a few bebop licks off that solo. So now, like when I'm playing blues, sometimes it's fun to just throw in a couple of those, you know.
Yeah, I need to
It's
do some more transcribing on Steely Dan stuff now.
yeah.
You've reminded me that I should actually learn that peg solo. Yeah.
The one I want to learn now is Home at Last. There's like this nice, I don't know who played it. It's probably Walter Becker or someone like that. But really nice solo on that one. Yeah.
Are you going to go and see James Taylor when he
I
comes to
am. I've got
Anthony's?
tickets. To,
Oh, good. I haven't got mine yet, but I'm going to go. I heard I was talking to Roger Fox, and he rang Steve Gadd and said, "Are you doing the James Taylor gig?" And he was like, "Yep, that's me." But the guitar player is Dean Parks, and I think it's Jimmy Johnson and maybe Larry Goldings or someone like
Larry
that. So
Golding's Walter Fowler.
and Walter Fowler, so killer band,
Yeah.
you know. No Landau, unfortunately, that would have been great, but
Yeah. Oh well. Because Landau's, I think, playing with Eric Johnson. Have you seen any of the videos
Oh.
that came out on YouTube from that gig?
no, I
Oh
haven't.
man, there's like a really nice version, I think, of Castles Made of Sand or something. One Hendrix song they do together, and they're both like huge Hendrix fans, right? You can tell when they're playing. But like like it's like the same thing, but they're looking at it from different angles,
Yeah, yeah,
which is amazing.
totally.
Yeah, I love when that happens.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, they got their styles are pretty well developed
And
now,
then at
right?
one point they're like just trading licks furiously, and then they go suddenly it goes into this very ambient, moody kind of little jam in the middle, and that's like suddenly takes you by surprise when that just creeps up on you. It's not like they went blah, 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 and dropped it. Like the way it just seamlessly morphs into this thing. I'm like, oh, now we are here, that kind of thing. It's you can't force these things, they just happen, and you have to just ride with it when it does.
Yeah, exactly. And those are the moments that we really live for in music, isn't it? Like when it goes there naturally, and it feels like that should have always been the way it went.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. Which does happen if you have a great band.
Yeah.
If you don't have a good band, like you said, you can't force it. It just doesn't.
I had a couple of those moments when we did that gig in Palmerston North, So
Man, you played so great with that. I loved it that both you and I, there was no microphones on the guitar amps, and your amp, you had my Mesa Boogie, and it was like right at the back of the stage, as far back as it could.
Yeah.
And you could still hear it like crystal clear.
Yeah, that was like a no sound check gig pretty much. Just land up and start playing.
Man, but it was better, right?
Yeah.
We didn't, like, had he put it in the PA, then we would have had to change what we do.
Yeah.
And it just didn't need to be. It's a small room.
Yeah.
It's like, man, put a bit of kick drum, and maybe the left hand of the organ.
Yeah.
That's about all you need, right? And then let the rest just happen naturally on stage.
There was a couple of times where like you and D were just going for it, and they were like in such perfect lock together. I was like, shit, oh, that's cool. Almost like you're on stage, but it's almost like you're part of the audience as well.
Oh man, I love playing with that guy. He's so great.
Yeah.
I got a recording session coming up next week. Some student at a music school here at Massey University is doing a recording project, and he's come out singing the trio a bunch of times, and he was like, "Can you guys come and be the band for my recording project?" I'm like, "Sure." So I got D and I've got Leo playing keyboard, and it'll be But I'm just glad I got those guys because they're awesome. So
Yeah. It's like almost we don't have to worry, whatever happens, they'll be onto it.
yeah, exactly. and I know that even if I just come in with two chords, they'll make two chords work, and it'll be awesome. So that's pretty much what I'm going to do.
Which is another thing Lukather was saying, coming back to him, like the arranger would just show up with a basic chord chart, and it was down to them to actually flesh it out and add the parts and make it sound like a song, like a record. And
Which is kind of bad, really, because really they're composing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I remember I did a session for someone, and it was a TV show, and he said to me, "Oh, I've got this idea. Can you and he basically he had this one held chord, and then I remember what I played. I went. That's what we arrived at, and it was for the Brian Edwards show when that used to be on TV, and he I was like. So I played, he said, I want something Jeff Beckish. So I played some Jeff Beck stuff. That wasn't it. And then he kept saying, no, more Jeff Beck. And so I do all the Jeff Beckisms, no, 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 no. And then I played that, and he was like, that's it, that's perfect. So in other words, he wanted a blues lick, but not Jeff Beck at all. But
Yeah.
I deciphered what he meant. But I kind of thought, man, I got paid for the session, but really I should have got a composing credit. Because I know that he got 20 grand to write that music, and really all he came up with was one chord, and I improvised the melody. So then you go,
Yeah.
well, and that sort of thing happens a lot. And I know my friend Ben Shepherd, when he was in LA, he refused to play a bass line unless they gave him a written part.
Mm-hmm.
And if they didn't, he said, I want points towards the composition. Because a lot of the hip hop guys would basically get him to come up with
With
90% of their
right,
tunes, you know,
and then they would make the whole song based around the bass line.
based around the
Yeah.
bass line which he had come up with, and then they'd get the full writer's credit and all the. And you know, he did some Kendrick Lamar albums and people like that, so he did some bigger profile things, you know.
Yeah. I mean that's happened to me a bunch of times, you know, in multiple sessions, like where you come up with a hook or a part that becomes such an identifiable part of the song. But you're never credited for it. And you know, I decided at some point that I would just stop caring about those.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't care if it's
Yeah.
like something like that, but if I've essentially composed like in that TV theme I talked about, you know. I mean, I've done a heap of TV themes over the years, but that was one where I really felt like, man, I composed that. I didn't just like come up with a hook or a riff or play some nice chord progression. Man, I played the whole entirety of the melody. Then you go, wow, it's a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, in that instance, what I did was I realized, oh well, I never made any agreement with him beforehand other than to come in and improvise a thing. I was getting paid, and I was getting paid well. And I thought, well, he's going to give me other sessions, because that's the other thing too, is you can burn your bridges and get all
Exactly.
shitty with them,
Yeah, totally.
and then they won't book you again for anything, and you've lost then too.
Yeah.
But what I learned from that was that, you know, you just got to be clear about it beforehand, and I wasn't, so it was on me,
Yeah.
really.
The same thing that Phil Palmer talks about in his book. He said there's heaps of sessions where he felt like, you know, he should have got a bit of writing credit, but it's just down to the fact that you want to maintain good relations and enable future work with those people. That you know, you have to decide when to open your mouth and when not to.
Yeah, as long as
Sometimes-
you're not getting ripped off, that's the thing. Like if you,
Yeah.
you know, if it's all sort of feeling fair-ish, then I'm like,
Yeah.
whatever, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's also times where like people have come up with an idea and I've just refined it a little bit. But that refining is what made it, you know, pop or whatever, you know. It's what gave it its charm. But again, there's nothing in the writing credit that says arrangement or refinement. You know?
Yeah,
There's
true.
no credit for that. So at the end of the day, I guess as long as you execute your part properly and you know, leave them happy, I guess that's, you know,
Which is what you want to do, really, you know, like you
Yeah.
want to go away from it making them feel like, you know, that you contributed something and that it was worthwhile getting you in, because if they feel the other way, then that doesn't work either, you know what I mean?
Yeah, true.
And I've definitely had sessions like that where I've gone away from it going, why did I bother? Like, you know, there wasn't, I don't know, and maybe it was like people's ego or something couldn't get out of the way of the music or whatever, and or they didn't know what they wanted, and you're like basically trying to get blood out of a stone, and you're just
Yeah.
going over and over and over again. I remember one session I did, they wanted me to, was for this documentary, and he wanted me to play rubato, so no tempo, but he had a click track.
Okay.
So
That's
a click track
interesting.
that moves. Like a moving target. And I'm like, man, it's like... So after about 50 takes of trying to get it to sort of flow with this wonky click track, I said, turn the bloody click track off and I'll just play it. And I did. And that was exactly what it needed. Because it felt more natural. I sort of flowed into each things, and just a strange way of working, you know.
Yeah.
But a lot of sessions are overdubs too, and that something like that would have worked much better had the string parts been played at the same time as me, and we all followed each other. Mm-hmm. But everything was done separately. So
That's another thing that's happened as well. Like sometimes I've played like a line, a melody line, and then the arrangers have used that to build like string lines or something from it. Which is quite cool when that happens, you know.
I've never had that with string lines, but I've had that with horn lines.
I'm sure.
Like I'll play something like, and they'll go da 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 da, with
Yeah.
the trumpets and okay,
Or they'll get off on the syncopation of what you played. They'll take the rhythmic values and maybe put different notes to it or something like that. Sometimes that happens.
I've definitely had
Yeah,
that too.
there was one time they just got me jamming along with the groove, and one of the things I had played was like this line that went, and that kind of became the hook of the song. I was just jamming along. It was like a rhythm part, and then that rhythm part was like, you know, surgically extracted, and then the whole riff is built on that. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, man, totally. Yeah, and the simpler it is, usually I've found the more likely it's likely to be pushed up in the mix,
Exactly.
and the more likely it's going to be used. And so I try and just pare things back to the simplest thing possible.
Yeah.
And in some ways that could probably seem a waste, that that simple idea I did, they could have got some student to do it.
Yeah.
But the difference is the student wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. Or wouldn't have thought
And
of
then-
it in the first place.
Wouldn't have thought in the first place, and probably not played it with the right sound or the right kind of execution, stuff like that.
yeah.
So
Yeah. There's like what is it called? Sometimes you just blank out on a train of thought. When it comes down to actually getting the part to sit, in the track, there's a few different ways you can play it, and sometimes it's like down to like the pick attack, and they'll say, oh no, try it a different way and something, and sometimes you think you're not changing anything, you're just doing the same thing again and again and again, but someone else would probably be just listening to some other aspect, because like when you're playing it and when you're listening back to it, it's almost like two different parts of your brain in operation.
So I thought I'd better just plug in my phone. I got a notification saying you've got 10% battery left or something.
Okay.
And I was like, because my phone is the camera. So
Oh dear.
yeah,
No worries.
I had a gig last Thursday actually with a guy from Auckland, and we finished the first set and we went out into the audience, and it was me and Johnny Lawrence, the bass player, and we were talking to the sound guy, and I was like, he said, "Oh man, I got no bass in the PA," and I said, "Let me guess, no guitar either," and he goes, "Nah," and he goes, "But I'm not mad about it." And I thought, great, like that makes a real change, like
Yeah.
I mean, the guy doing it's a musician, so he kind of gets it. But usually what you'd get is hey man, what are you doing? Turn down. I haven't got you in the PA system. And you're like, great, don't. Like, really all he had was keyboard, maybe kick drum. And, it was like, that was fine. That was all it needed to have. And you know what I mean? So it's kind of all those battles with sound and things,
The funny thing is, like, the PAs in the early days used to be called sound reinforcement. Reinforcements are like whatever's not there, you add to it, right? It's not like you're creating the whole thing out of nothing. I mean, you're kind of just mixing around what's actually coming off stage, especially in smaller venues. If it's like a huge arena or something, it's a totally different ball game. But usually,
I find this is one of the big things with sound guys too when it comes to session work as well. And this is kind of where I was going with that, is that like when you're doing sessions, do you find this as well, that I've given up on trying to get good headphone mixes anymore. I used to go, no, just give me a little bit more bass and a little bit, and it was like it's never ever been ideal.
Yeah.
So now I'm just like, just get on with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, usually headphone mixes I've only really enjoyed when those studios have those little, mini fader things where you can
do it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or, if my amp's in the room, just pull one ear off, that kind of thing. Ideally, I like to play in the control room. So very often, like in most of this thing, even if the whole band was playing together, I'd be sitting in the control room with my guitar coming off the studio speakers, and that's how I'd be listening to it. It's usually only if I was maybe playing an acoustic guitar part and I needed to be isolated or something like that, because I would always carry a very long speaker cable and have the amp in the room with me and just put the cab into one of the ISO booths and, have it mic'd up.
Best way to do it.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons I've been less into combos for recording and thinking, the deluxe is like one of the classics for recording, but I thought, man, it'd be really great to have a deluxe as a head. Mm-hmm. And then you can put the cab in the other room.
Yep.
Makes such a difference.
If you ever get a Fendery head, you should check out the Cerbella. I think that's like a pretty,
It's one of the better ones I've ever heard. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. I mean, and it holds up. It can grit a bit if once you push the volume past 6, but even as like a clean platform, it's like one of the most robust sounding, bass tones I've heard. Apparently, so like refused to skimp on the transformers. Like, so it's got a bit of weight on it. It's not the lightest. Like those little lunchbox mini amps with tiny transformers. It's not one of those. So the power section's pretty, because the other day I'd gone over to a mate's house, and he's got a warehouse actually, so we'd like turn the amp up, and like even the 22-watt setting, it does like a half volt.
Still loud.
Yeah, it's still loud, and you can actually feel the difference more than you can actually hear it. Because the 22
When it's still 22 watts running through those big ass transformers, isn't it?
Pretty much.
Through a big cabinet and the whole lot. Like, it's like, that's the interesting thing when you switch an amp down to 22 watts. It's not really 20. It's not like running a 22 watt amp. Because a 22 watt amp would have smaller transformers and all that stuff and you can hear it. You can. I remember a friend of mine, Rob Matthews, the guitar tech in Wellington, telling me he went and saw Jackson Brown in Auckland. And he had Mason Stoops playing guitar. And he said he didn't really like the guitar sound. He was like, I don't know, man. He goes, it sounded like small iron to him. And I thought, okay, because, he likes those little projector amp heads or whatever weird stuff he's into, And you can hear it, it sounds different. So like your Sir Bella, man, that's a powerful head,
And that's another thing I noticed as well on these two gigs, because even the smaller venues, when I had those two Mesa half stacks behind me, they weren't like blaringly loud. They were just enough where I could hear it over the drums. And the front of house guy had like zero issues with it. The only thing is, I think I angled them slightly so they weren't like firing straight at the sound console. That's like the first thing I always like see where the amp is firing. If it's firing at the FOH position, I just move it so it's going somewhere else. Let someone else get the brunt of it, but not him.
And when they tell you to turn down, that's the first thing you do is just move your amp. You don't actually turn down at all.
Nope.
Just move your amp so it's pointing somewhere else, and it usually fixes a lot of the issues.
I had one guy once, he did something really cool. Like when he put the mic on my cab, he went to his EQ and he just shelved off all the highs, and he was just using the PA to reinforce the lows and the mids coming from. He's saying there's plenty of high end coming off the stage. But what you need is just the spread of the mid-range frequencies in the room. Yeah. And I have to say, it worked pretty cool.
It's funny you say that, because I mentioned the other day about that gig we did with Tabani, and it was, we were talking with the sound guy, and Johnny Lawrence said the best thing that always happens is when he works with Tiki Tane quite a bit. He said Tiki's his favourite sound guy. And he said one thing he loves about Tiki is he turns the front of house PA off. And he just gets the band sound going, gets the monitors going so that's that, and then puts the front of house in.
Right.
Man, I couldn't tell you how many sound guys go, before you've even done anything, they haven't done any monitors, they haven't got any sound for you.
Yeah.
They go, okay, can you give me just the kick drum? And they spend 5 minutes EQing the kick drum. Okay, can you give me just the snare? And then and you're like, man, we'll play differently when it sounds different on the stage. Like, let's get the stage, turn the PA off and just get that happening first, and then. But apparently that's what Tiki does, and he gets the, and then he'll push the front in.
Right.
And I thought,
that sounds pretty cool.
That's it.
Yeah. Here's another thing I learned as well. Never play a note of guitar on stage until the drummers hit that snare drum a few times.
Yeah, I've had that. I know that one too, right?
Just
because the first thing you get is, man, you can't play that loud, and you're like,
wait till the drums. So I just wait for the drummer to go rat-a-tat-a-tat-a-tat, and then by the time everyone's ears have gotten used to that volume, and then I slowly bring the amp in.
And there's the old classic, sound check volume and then gig volume. Yeah. which is sometimes not necessarily a conscious thing.
Yeah.
It could just be all of a sudden now you've got an audience, so there's energy and you're putting something out to them.
I was watching this rig rundown once with Justin Derrico from Pink's band. I think the only reason I have a volume pedal is in between songs I can pull it back and shred at a really low volume without annoying people. I know exactly what he means.
Yeah. He's a great player. Holy shit, that guy can play. Really, really great player. He was looking for a couple of those Laney cabs for the Pink show in Auckland.
Right.
I don't know if I told you, but
the powered ones.
Yeah, they were looking for the ones to run off his modeler. And I don't think he would have cared because he was just going to go to the front of house anyway, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was using a Fractal XFX or FM9, one or the other. And but that Laney wanted to have two of the cabs on stage, you know.
Right.
And they've got these 2x12 powered cabs, you know, and so basically a 4x12 on stage.
Yeah.
But they're so. I had a look at one of them because I thought actually that could be cool. Maybe I'll buy one. But they're so heavy, ridiculous. They're like 45 kgs or something, like heavier than a half stack. You know what I mean? And I'm like, that's not the point, all right? I'm gonna be on these anyway, and
Yeah.
you know, and then there's monitors on stage anyway, so I'll just run out of those, you know.
You know what Landau is doing on his gigs? It's something pretty interesting. He's got a 50-watt, I think a Morgan of some sort, but he's loading it down with a SIR reactive load, and then the line out goes into his wet effects, and that goes into Sieber Duncan Power Stage 700. It's like a solid state power amp, like big, and it's got volume, bass, middle, treble. And he's running this 1x12 of that. And if you listen to Eric Johnson and Landau together, Eric Johnson's got this wall of Marshalls and maybe some Durock or whatever, you know, the back of the things. Like, huge amp setup, and Landau's got this little thing over there. Sounds equally big, if not bigger than that.
Those Seymour Duncan power stages are like really popular with the Fractal guys.
Yep.
There's a lot of people doing that, and I saw Dante Friziello, is that how you say his name? The who's the guitar player, rhythm guitar player for Steve Vai, and he was using a FM9 like my one back there, and into one of those power stage, and then that was feeding two 2x12 cabs. And I thought that was interesting because when I saw him in New Zealand with Steve Vai, he had a FM3, so the even smaller one, and a couple of pedals in front of it, and was just running direct with in-ears, you know. But I think a lot of people are really going that way, running through it, because those power stages are basically just clean power, and all the frequencies, so they work really well with the modelers, you know.
I almost bought one because I think last year or year before last, during Black Friday, there was some deal on top of a deal going on, and I think Music Works may have had them going for like $700, like a ridiculously cheap price. I was like super tempted, and at the time I was trying to reamp the SIR reactive load, so I'd sent an email to John Sir asking him like, "Do you think this is a good power amp?" He said, no, the Moss valves are the one to get, you know, those old ones from the 90s or whatever. And then he said, but why even bothering it? You've got two of the best power amps ever with the OD100 and the Marshall that he modded. He's saying just use the effects returns, and he told me how to set them up with the feedback and depth and everything. And then I was like, yeah, actually, you know, I already have it and there's no need to buy any more gear.
Yeah, but I want more gear.
Exactly. Now looking back, I was like, I should have bought it.
Especially at that price, because you probably could have sold it for about the same price anyway.
Or if a little bit more.
Or a little bit more, yeah, and made a bit of coin. Yeah, but they become really popular with the modeler guys. You know, they're a lot of folks are getting into those. Or there's a pedal version, which is even smaller.
Yep.
Rather than the rack. I think the pedal version is maybe 200 watts. And it's basically a pedal power amp.
Have you tried those Matrix ones? I think they were made in the UK with the slightly meshy kind of front. And there was one which was kind of interesting. They put 3 power amps in a 1U rack, and you could do a wet dry wet with that, you know. So you can power 3 cabs or whatever, but I don't know, bit of overkill. What I want is actually someone to make like a mono power amp, you know, like a 50-watt tube mono power amp. And apparently this guy in Russia, Myasnikov, who built my Tube Pre, he does something like that, because then if you've got like your one dry thing, then you can always run like wet dry or something like that with, you know, any power amp of that sort. Right now I'm still working on my pedal build, so I actually experimented a bit more with that, and I found it didn't have exactly enough amount of low end, especially at like lower volumes. So I found this other kit that JCar sold called the High Power Amplifier, and I built that. And that's around 13 watts odd, and it drives the 4x12. And that sounds like quite big and powerful.
Is that the little one you showed me, the little power amp?
No, so that one was another module that I think, one sec, let me just see if I can pull it out.
While you're doing that, I'll play some
So
cheesy interlude music.
it's going to fit into this box, which is like a normal pedal size thing. And I've built the circuit. I tested it. It works. So that's the amplifier chip there, a little bit of a heat sink, and there's maybe like 4 or 5 other components, because most of the work is being done by that chip. That's your speaker output, that's your power supply, and guitar input. So all now some drilling will happen tomorrow, but this bloody one thing that they don't tell you is that you have to earth the thing to another device which has a mains earthing, because this thing
What?
it's running off 9 volts, right? There's no earth reference on the circuit to ground to your
But
house mains.
it's 9 volt. It shouldn't need it, should it?
It shouldn't need it, but it bloody buzzes like a banshee until you ground it. So the moment I
Oh, man.
had it running into the amp, so from the line out, it stopped doing that. I was like, oh, it just needed an earth. They should have mentioned it. Some sort of earthing reference, because till that it's unusable. It was just like, And I thought I built it wrong. I checked the circuit like maybe 5 times, and I was like, I did it right. And then that's all that was needed.
It's funny, I've had the same problem with my Telecaster recently, where it was just buzzing, and I couldn't figure out why. And then so I took it to someone that needed a setup. It hasn't had one for probably 10 years, because I never use it here in the studio when I need that specific thing, And I took it to someone, and he goes, oh, there's no earth wire at all.
Oh.
There wasn't one at all.
Wow.
Because the Telecaster pickup with its the big bass plate on the bridge pickup was acting as the earth.
Right.
Because it's directly connected into the bridge. So, of course, I've changed the pickup out, and, of course, now there's no earth. And I was like,
right.
Man.
Crazy.
Yeah.
You know something? When you turn your guitar volume down and the buzz gets louder, that's a dead giveaway that there's some weird shit going on, which is usually an earthing problem from the amp side. So you kind of have to, like, even in my room, I think there are certain power plugs that are noisier than others. That's
definitely a thing, isn't it?
I don't know. There's definitely a science to it, but my brain hasn't.
Yeah, I don't know what it is,
yet.
but like Hashigo was like, there was, that club we used to play all the time that's just recently closed, but that had 2 power points literally next to each other on the same wall. One you'd make your amp sound like it had no top end, and the other one was just clean and clear. It's like they weren't run off the same thing, but I suspect there were 2 different circuits come into 2 different plugs.
Right.
But I think something had been tapped off one of them, which was draining. This is what I think, but I don't know for sure. But man, I really noticed it. It was like, just awful.
I mean, you've probably played at that club heaps of times, and every time you've played there, has your amp always been in the same place, usually?
Pretty much, yeah. When I did.
Because there used to be a club in Bombay called Blue Frog, and I've played there heaps of times. And the first time I played there, my amp went like, normally stage, like if it was facing the audience, I was like on the hi-hat side, right, at that end. And every other time we played there, I ended up, using the same place. Now, the very last night that club was open, they had a whole bunch of bands playing. And at that time, someone had already, placed their amps in that position. So the only other thing was like the one which was closer to the green room. So I put it over there. And that's the best it ever sounded in that room. I was like, shit, all these years.
Should have been doing it all along.
I should have just been putting the amp here, And I think later on they were testing. I said, just measure the voltage between the 2 places. And it was different.
It does. It makes a big difference with a tube amp, doesn't it? The voltage, not only for like earth loops and hum and that kind of stuff, but also like, just the way the amp's gonna sound, And I think amps sound better at 110 volt.
Do you?
I hate to say it. I think so. All the amps I've played in the US just sound a little different.
So that's the thing. I think the American built amps sound better at 110 and the Marshall sound better at 240.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty much a Fender amp guy, so when I'm saying I'm talking about Fenders,
because
sure.
the guys in the States, they say, the Marshalls never sound as good in the States as they do in Europe and the UK, which kind of makes sense. They're designed for 240 and 50 hertz. So apparently, Sir had an issue of, I think, one particular model of amp having trouble with 240. And then he realizes, because he tests his amps at 60 hertz, which is the American standard. And even though he's changing the voltage, that frequency was still 240 volt 60 hertz. So then he
Instead
got
of
this
50 hertz.
expensive supply that changes the hertz as well to 50 hertz, and then now he, managed to test it out on that or something like that, which is kind of crazy.
I think it's one of the reasons so many people are digging the Friedmans, you know what I mean? And because they're designed in the US
Yep.
with to sound like a Marshall, but they're doing their thing, right? And I heard someone talking about that the other day on YouTube. I forget who it was. And he was saying that, oh, no, it was Keith Williams from 5 Watt World, where he did a thing about the Plexis, and he actually used a Friedman, but I think it was him. He was talking about the volume being down a bit, to the cleaner side of the Friedman, and it sounded more Plexi than the Plexi they had, So, because, it's designed for that 110 volt thing, and it's running optimally, and the Friedmans really are pretty good.
Yeah.
I'd love to get one now. Now that I've played it in the modeler and I like it so much, I'm like, damn, I want to buy one now.
Yeah. I think I spoke to Simon as well about like my Soldano. It runs off 110, 117 actually. And, I was thinking maybe I should just convert it for, 240. And, after speaking to him, I think I'll just leave it the way it is. Because
If it's sounding good, don't touch it.
Exactly.
That's the thing.
Because
there's no guarantee you'll ever get back
it
to
will
that
sound
point.
the same again, right? So yeah, maybe I'll just leave it as it is. It would be nice to take it out to gig and stuff, but like the thought of carrying a step down transformer for every gig is like one extra thing to
exactly.
carry.
See, my Bassman has like never sounded the same since Simon's worked on it, and he's the only one who's really managed to keep it working. But it's had about 4 or 5 other people tinker with it, and it's never quite sounded as good as it used to. Do you know what I mean? It's now a much colder, harder sound. It still sounds great, don't get me wrong, but I kind of wish people had just left it alone. Maybe one day I'll take it to Clary or someone and just say, hey, like, just return this to stock,
It could also be like sometimes the power tubes get a bit old and need to be replaced, and they'll never end up getting the very same kind of tubes as, they vary even the same brand and stuff like that. They'll all be slightly different.
I think one of the key things with it was you used to be able to turn it up to about 6 or 7, and that was the breakup point. Whereas now the breakup point is more like 3, so it breaks up.
I have to send you that 5751. Just remind me. I'm going to do it.
I think that's what I put in it.
Yeah, but you've probably put in a new one. I'll send you a nice old one and see. I'll send you a couple actually, because you can actually put them in 2 different positions and see where you have some. Yeah. Because they're just sitting here, so I might as well send them across to you to have some fun with them. Cool.
Thanks, dude. Yeah.
On that note, I think we should wrap before the jet lag starts kicking in. It's quite real.
Yeah, we've been going for an hour. So
yeah. But yeah.
Great to catch up, man.
Totally, man.
Glad you're back back into the land of the living again. And
yeah. the land of clean air.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll get to people's questions and stuff. I think Glenn wanted us to talk about vibrato, but that's like a totally different episode altogether. So
let's have a hit on that next week.
We'll do that next week. And till then, see you guys. Lovely seeing you again. Bye bye.